Welcome, everybody, to another series from datastorage.com. We're happy to have Seth Helgesen with us today from IONOS. How are you, Seth?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm excellent. We have a pretty cool show here ready for the audience to kind of dig into how data storage is evolving in this new AI era and how you guys are going to be a big player in that. All right, so Seth, maybe you can start off by just telling us a little bit about yourself. I know that you've been in the data infrastructure world for over 2 decades, but why don't you give us a little intro on yourself?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, so like a lot of people of a particular age or my age, I've been in the technology field for a long time. My background has primarily been on network and infrastructure uh, from a beginning, and then moved into systems and startup worlds and all of those fun things until making it to an infrastructure architect or a solutions architect here at IONOS, where I can bring all of that fun stuff that I've learned over the couple of decades to say, okay, well, how do we help you migrate to the cloud or off of the cloud or hybrid into the cloud? That's typically what we do. It's usually not a all for one, hey, we're going to lift and shift and everything's going to go into the cloud. It's a much more in-depth conversation, and that's where I come into play there.
Absolutely. I know Ionis has also been through a very unique transition over the years. Maybe you can give us a little bit of history on where Ionis started and where it is today and how you guys have kind of migrated into some new items.
Yeah, absolutely. So from an Ionis standpoint, Ionis has I'd say a pretty typical story from a starting just like a lot of other people where we existed doing domains and SSL certs and all of that fun stuff, and then started adding on products and services as the company grew and grew. So over 20 years, we can see very easily, hey, a lot of domain and hosting providers that were out there in the quote unquote beginning that we ultimately moved to. Okay, we're doing great providing domains and hosting and SSL certs, but how do we provide that same simple type of formula to the cloud and to the infrastructure workspace? Because there's always been a lot of barriers or complications, I will say, getting into any new technology. And while the cloud is not new at this point, it's definitely a newer paradigm that a lot of corporations and enterprises are trying to shift into either wholesale or hybrid, like we were just talking about before. So really, Ionis as a company grew with those requirements, especially in Europe, but also throughout the world, where said, okay, we're doing a great job providing domains and hosting. It's a real simple product, simple to get, simple to pay for. And how do we bring that same simplicity to the cloud and infrastructure side of things? And that's
Very
where the
nice.
Ionis cloud product really started from there.
Do you know what year the Ionis cloud product was released?
So we've gone through a couple of different forms in it, but at least 7 years ago. And we've been refining that product really as the backbone to all of our products, including our domain and hosting product, over the past 5 years. So that same simple implementation is also what we distribute to our domain and hosting retail customers. It's just obfuscated so that we are using the same infrastructure across the board so that we are able to get those efficiencies that we found in the domain and hosting side and get those same types of efficiencies on the cloud side. So that's where we are.
Very cool. And you guys started out with your own data centers in Europe, correct?
Mhm.
Where within Europe are your data centers located?
So they're spread throughout Europe, primarily within Germany, France, and the UK. We also have a couple new data centers coming online in places like Spain and a couple other places that'll be announced soon. But really, the way that IONOS grew was really taking that cost piece, that cost focus, and saying, okay, for these particular build outs, as we're adding customers to our both our cloud products and our domain and hosting products, we look at things along the lines of, okay, should we build out our own data center? Should we merely load our infrastructure on top of existing commodity gear within colo centers? And really, that type of math comes into play with everything that we're putting in, so that what ends up happening is we have about a 50-50 distribution between our own data centers, where we do everything soup to nuts, and our colo data centers, where we may outsource, physical hosting, security, power, those pieces, looking at both of those and determining the best cost mix that is going to work out best for our customers. And that's how we have gone through things, keeping that 50-50 ratio.
Very cool. Do you ever host your hardware within a customer's environment?
We do, and we are looking at these types of scenarios even more, especially when it comes to, as you mentioned before, the being a European company. GDPR is a huge piece that goes into the compliance footprint, and some of our customers, being, we'll call them state customers across Europe, really get into, okay, we love your platform. We have our own type of infrastructure that you want to load your platform and systems on top of, where they become sort of that colo type of facility, but it is all for them. So using our IP, using our technology, so that they can do these same types of infrastructure provisioning on the back end that we do currently for our domain and hosting, our cloud, and our other retail customers. So long way to answer, yes, we do that for some of our larger private customers as well.
Yeah, I think that's becoming more and more popular on the larger customer side, but also with these, AI training, training AI models and LLMs. It seems like customers, even the smaller ones that are using a lot of GPU and compute, are requesting that that data sits as close to their hardware as possible, just for, increasing speed as much as they can.
Yeah, and that's been a huge piece with us recently, where we've been releasing our GPU products. We just made another GPU release this week, and we are going to be continuing to release that GPU as infrastructure type of product. So bringing that ease to easily provision a GPU, do the, training the models and those types of things. And you are absolutely right that data proximity has become a huge point for most of our customers that are using both GPU and using object storage, because, if you're sifting through 2-3 petabytes worth of data, even if you have 100 gigabit, 1 terabit type of backbones, those things can still take up lots and lots of bandwidth, and you want to be able to pour through the data as quickly as possible. So yeah, that having that stuff as close as possible is definitely one of the pieces that we're working on.
Absolutely. And we'll get back to some of that GPU talk in a moment here. I wanted to kind of switch gears over to the United States market, right? I know that you guys have been, doing a really good job against some of the hyperscaler clouds over in Europe. And at this point, you're a public company. You guys have been performing solidly over the years. And it sounds like there are plans to kind of really come into that US market as well, and want to hear some of your plans around that.
Sure. So at a high level, as we talked about before, GDPR is a huge selling point for Europe. We know that, and as a European company, as a German company, we take that very seriously, and that is a huge piece, that sovereignty within Europe right now, as we all know. That is also an important piece to a lot of American companies, although most American companies don't know the term GDPR necessarily, or those types of things. So where we bring in our base level compliance, your basic compliance across the board, your SOC and all those ISO compliances and all those fun things that we provide when we get into it. What we are really finding within the American market is that the customers in America, while further ahead in some areas, are actually not as far ahead knowledge wise as some of the European customers that we have. So there's two very different types of customers in this space. In America, most of the customers know exactly what they want at what price point that they want because they're used to comparing the hyperscaler prices, comparing back and forth apples to apples as best as we can, which is unfortunately in the cloud space very hard to do. There's no such thing as an apples to apples comparison. But what we've been able to do with that sovereignty focus that we have in Europe is bring that same sovereignty focus to the US, and at the same time provide a infrastructure platform that is very easy for our American customers to spin up in a manner that they can make a direct comparison to those hyperscalers. So what I always bring this example up, but one of the things that we go through is while we are providing cloud, those customers that are already used to the three-letter names that are already out there that we don't need to bring up, but all the big players that are currently out there, there's hundreds of different instance types, hundreds of different storage tier types, all of those types of things. We are actually simplifying all of that, where we are bringing just a couple of types of both compute and a couple of types of object storage and a couple of types of block storage. Because what we've found is that you can get into the weeds as much as you want with any customer. If you're shaving cents off for operating costs, that most people are going to say, okay, well, it's 2 cents because you gave me an extra 2 gig of RAM or this type of thing. We're actually saying, look, we have enough play wiggle room in all of these areas to be able to give you a higher performing product at the same price as these other players might be able to do, quite simply for the fact that these customers know exactly what they want from a performance standpoint. And if you keep trying to throw different over provisioned burstable instances, those types of things at them, they're going to say, look, I want to pay a couple cents more just for the peace of mind. And we don't care that, we're not exactly matching that 75% usage threshold that lots of customers are trying to get into. It's saying, look, you can run at 30% on our gear with that super extra headroom that you can burst into at any point and it's all yours. You don't have to worry about it. You can't get to the level that a lot of these hyperscalers have gotten to, which is, okay, well, we shaved off a couple of cents here and there for these compute costs. And that's great if your customers are Netflix or Amazon Prime or any of those types of things. It's not great when you may only have 2 to 10 grand a month that you're spending on compute. And it's like, look, that's only going to save me a couple of cents here and there. I
Yeah.
just want to have the peace of mind to be able to burst when I need to and do it.
So is it safe to say that your moat to break into the US market is higher performance or lower costs? Like, what is it?
I think it's simplicity and higher performance and lower costs. So three things all at the same time. So simplicity, transparency in our cost on what it's going to cost. So at any point in time, being able to look at what your spend is and being able to modify it in real time without going through 50 different contracts that you might have for a particular compute or object storage use case. We are trying to bring things back to the way that cloud was when it first came out, which is here's all the performance that you can use, change it at any time, right size it to where you can get, but you don't have to worry about the 50 different compute platforms that we might have or anything like that. You've got three, and there's plenty of room for you to burst within those three types of platforms. So lower
Gotcha.
cost, more transparency, and better performance across the board is what we're looking at.
Great. And where are your data centers in the United States?
So following that 50-50 type of
Yep.
colo to private data center approach, we have one of our own private data centers in the US, right in the middle of the country in Kansas, and then two colo data centers mirroring East and West Coast so that we get all sort of three zones within the US to handle data replication and all those types of things, keep things disparate.
All right. And what is the entry level price for object storage, like cost per terabyte in US or Europe?
So across the board, that's one of the things that we are leading with, that greater performance at the lowest cost. So the lowest cost being $4.99 per terabyte per month. Egress costs for first 2 terabyte free, and no contracts or lock-ins that we were talking about before, where you don't have a minimum commit or anything like that. Just start using our object storage. You get billed for what you use every month, and that's it.
Very cool. So you said $4.99 per terabyte of always hot storage.
Always hot. Yep. No tiered or anything like that. Always hot, always on demand.
Okay. And do you have any, let's call them like glacier tier type tiers of storage, or is it all hot all the time, always 4.99? Or I'm sure
hmm
there's some negotiations you have in there, but
Now we don't have those different tiered storage types primarily because we are finding that as the AI revolution explodes, we would like to think that we're keeping one copy of our data and then doing the transforms and all of that fun stuff as needed. What we are actually finding is that most corporations are saying, look, we're going to take someone like IONOS object storage for our initial ingress point, do our ingestions, or maybe you have a Kafka channel or something like that that you're performing real-time analysis of the data that's coming in, and then performing replications based upon logic from there. Maybe you're going to take it into your own private data lake. Maybe you're going to take it into another cloud data lake. Maybe you're going to use a data lake that's within IONOS. But based upon that, we've found that we are really just operating always hot all the time, no matter what, and that our customers use us for that. So there's no point in us, bringing another product to market that no one's going to use. So
yeah, I
that's why
think
we're
that's a
better.
really good point in that, in the past, companies didn't need always on access to all the different data that they had been accumulating. And
hmm
now it's like we've got these LLMs that we can use our first party data to, make reference off a foundation API, or do some fine tuning of a open source model, or even train our own models, right? So it is a good point that the hotter the data these days, the better, because you're much more likely to require access for one project or another, and it's a real
Yeah.
pain in the butt to get it out of those glacier archives, right? And expensive.
Yeah. And also is not going to work for your workflow, whatever you're doing, because if you're doing something glacier wise and it's going to take 3 hours to get it out of cold, your workflow isn't probably going to wait for 3 hours to execute again.
Yeah.
So, keeping it hot seems to be the norm right now.
Let's kind of shift gears a little bit to, okay, if a company's interested in shifting from on-prem or from one of the hyperscaler clouds, do you have compatible APIs with AWS, Azure, any of the other, major hyperscalers?
Yeah, so object storage is becoming a straight commodity now. It's obviously AWS invented it originally with S3, and Azure and us and everyone else have started S3 compatible object storage. So we are fully compatible with the S3 tool sets and the AWS SDKs. So we are completely, if you're looking to move workflows and you already have an investment in the S3 ecosystem, all of our ecosystems work with that as well. So not a problem.
Very nice. And do you guys make compatibility with the IAM protocols from S3?
We do. I mean, there's a couple of things that AWS keeps buried that they're like, hey, this is only for us to use, and yeah, which is always fun. But 90% of the features and functions, including 90% of the IAM features and functions, are also available within IONOS as well as
Very cool.
AWS. Yep.
Very cool. It seems like you guys also have some type of partner ecosystem that both assists with migrations, and there's potentially some funding that comes along with a transfer of data from inside a walled garden to Ionis. Can you tell us a little bit about how your partner ecosystem helps make that transition, and how you guys might also, with some funding of larger data transfers?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are, it tends to get beaten to death in the States how we are each company is a channel friendly company, and we have resellers and everything like that out there that they are our bread and butter. I know lots of other companies say that that is the case, but for us, we hand off these migration functions to our reseller ecosystem and partner ecosystem all the time. We have a number of tools and infrastructure on the back end to help those partners do the migrations both on-prem to cloud, or maybe doing a hybrid type of approach or multi-cloud type of approach, something like that. So we have all of those, and people like me and other people on my team work with those resellers and partners all the time to make sure that, okay, this tool set is going to work. This tool set is, we're going to be transferring 2 petabyte. We're going to spread that across either multiple data centers, or we're going to do a shipping type of approach where we do a data sync to a local device and then ship it off. So we do those things all the time. We work directly through our channel and reseller partner ecosystem to do that. We don't do it ourselves. We always refer those things out. So that's an important piece. And that being said, we also work with a number of the standard players that are out there. Your products like your Carbonites or your Acronuses or your Veeams or all of those types of things. We are agnostic. We are just providing the infrastructure that you can build your solution on top of. And we work with all of those guys to do seeding, backup and restore, remote spin, all of those types of things, so that all of those features and functionalities our partners come up with are right there for them to use with the applications they're already used to using. So
So
that's where,
it's yeah, so it sounds like you have integration and reseller partners who kind of fuel the help customers may need in some of the more complex use cases from a services side, and then you also have integration partners that make it easy to build on top of. Wondering also, if I had a petabyte of data in S3 and I needed to egress it out to Ionis, are there any kind of subsidized programs that you guys have internally to help me to not have to pay the 9 cents a gigabyte or whatever it is they're charging these days?
yeah, and that's always a big question, and trying to determine what is free and what you can move out from your existing provider without paying for, and so on and so forth, is a full process unto itself, obviously. But directly speaking to it, we have, using our resellers and our partners, and also just with direct customers that come on with a petabyte, we have multiple marketing programs that are looking to cover the costs of that, anywheres from small customers that may only spend $1,000 to move that, to a larger customer that may need to spend $20,000 to move their existing data out, and would be incurring some costs with that. So we are absolutely flexible when it comes to the costs and programs that we can use to reimburse our customers with anything they may need to do to transfer data over. So a lot of flexibility there.
Very cool. I think maybe we can switch gears now from just object storage. Well, actually, let's do one more question about object storage. If I had, let's say, 250 terabytes or a petabyte or 5 petabytes, what is the rate of speed that I can onboard that data at? And then if I wanted to say send a petabyte of data out of IONOS to my NeoCloud GPU or internally in my GPU structure in IONOS, how long does it take to kind of process the data into a hybrid environment that I can use it somewhere else?
Yeah, so the devil is always in the details with any of these things, how big the individual files are, if they're a bunch of
Yeah,
small files or big files, blah, 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 blah. The devil's in the details, as we always say. But I can say from personal experience that me and my team have worked on numerous data moves where we're talking 2 to 7 petabytes of data. And depending on where it's coming from and the structures, we've seen transfer speeds of 1 petabyte every couple of days to petabyte over a week, 2 weeks. Again, it depends on where it's coming from, where it's going to. We also have the ability, we have numerous customers that also use a private cross connect into our data centers so that they may get their own dedicated pipe into our data centers and do file transfers that way if that's something that is really important from both the data access speed and volume of data. So we run the gamut from that standpoint. Just publicly, like I said, we can go anywhere from 1 petabyte a day to a week, depending on what the customer pipe looks like, to if it's going to take a really long time, then we'll look at seeding, sending devices, those types of things. And that's where the devil is in the details. But fortunately,
absolutely.
we have that marketing funding that we can use to, get rid of that cost in coming over. So,
Yeah. I think we're ready to kind of switch into, okay, you don't just have object storage. It sounds like there's some block storage in there. You also have some type of CPU, and it sounds like now GPU. Can you tell us a little bit about the hardware mix?
yeah. So, like many cloud providers that are out there, we have a particular hardware stack and arrangement that works for us. Most of the time, these are what are affectionately called commodity systems and that type of thing. So systems built to spec where we optimize electricity, cooling, compute, all of those fun things. And we have we have a standard stack that works for us. That said, that is our underlying platform. So the clustering redundancy commodity that we build out within each of our data centers, no matter if it's private or colo, gives that access to the customer to, like we just talked about, object storage being one of them, but also compute, easy provisioning of virtual machines within our compute environment, being able to choose what CPUs they want to use. Maybe we have a number of customers that have particular CPU requirements that they need a code set for or something like that. So you can choose your CPU type, AMD, Intel, and other types that are out there depending on the data center. And from there, being able to do network provisioning, load balancing, all of these network layers as well, so that a drag and drop environment for your entire infrastructure provisioning, but being able to do everything within that drag and drop, like I mentioned, from object storage to compute, block storage, shared block storage and infrastructure, GPUs now, and being able to determine how you want all of those interconnected. Maybe you want to do a private cross connect, like we talked about before, between your on-prem location and your cloud environment so that you're just shipping stuff up there that you need to do within the cloud, to a cloud cross connect between our cloud environment and maybe an AWS or an Azure or something like that, so that you can do data transfers between those two as well. So we run the board from that standpoint, but really just trying to provide an easy interface for our systems admins and business people that are out there, so you know the cost, it's easy to implement, and being able to take it from there.
Very cool. Yeah, no, I took a look at your guys' software, which is Also, a point that I want to kind of touch on here, you're not just a low cost, high performance hardware company that has, hardware across, it sounds like storage, compute, GPU networking, and probably more, even, the DNS and domains that were kind
Mhm.
of the origination products. But you also have a software that kind of brings a lot of that stuff together and, can be used from a partner or an end user. And love to kind of hear your thoughts on the software, where it's at, how it enables your users, and how it potentially creates a competitive advantage when you're looking at storage providers, compute providers, et cetera.
Yeah, that's a great overview of one of the issues that we try to tackle here all the time, which is I have a personal. I've worked in all of the hyperscaler spaces. I'm certified in all their spaces and all of that fun stuff. But one of the things that is definitely a part of the overall business equation is understanding that some of those environments require much more training and certification than many businesses, quite frankly, have. So, it's expensive to get a solutions architect for one of the hyperscalers to come in and say, this is the way you should build your environment. So, from that standpoint, we really tried to simplify the cloud provisioning process. We take care of the redundancy on the back end. We take care of provisioning all of those things just based on what you drag and drop out there. And you don't have to get your entire team to certify itself. These are the types of things that they've been doing for a while. Okay, I can drag and drop and provision a virtual machine and then take that and snap it into my environment because we're totally open using open source tools and everything like that, including hyperscaler environments. But you don't have to be the full blown certified in order to figure out how to do that. You could take your existing stacks that most customers have been using on prem or within other virtualized environments and simply build that out within our environment without having to spend 2 months certifying and getting into a course workload and all of that fun stuff. So that's really what we tried to bring to the table, saying, okay, grab it, use all the open source tools that you're already used to using, but you're not locked into a hyperscaler platform that requires solutions and design architects to come in and build out for you that are quite frankly very costly.
Absolutely. And is it easy for somebody to come and try the software out? Like, do you guys have a PLG motion, or,
Yeah.
what does that look like?
Yeah, so it's very easy. You can sign up for a trial account at any point and build everything live whenever you're ready. So you get 30 days, get a month to play with it, get a bunch of people in your organization to start spinning things up, figure out how you can use it with your existing tools, and you're off to the races. So, it's pretty straightforward. Just put your name and email address in, and you can start signing up and spinning things up.
Very cool. Want to kind of talk about the market and your ideal customer profile. I call this kind of like, where do you guys really deserve to win, and where do you look to win? Like, what types of companies, and maybe we focus on the object storage side of things,
Mhm.
are you really focused on communicating with and providing solutions for?
Yeah, so the object storage is a natural first step for the American market, especially the hyperscalers, namely AWS. Started this market with their S3 product essentially, and what everyone used the S3 product for was starting off with, okay, I need a low cost, cheap place to just throw all my data, and I'll figure out what to do with it later. What a number of players have figured out, and AWS figured out as well, and what IONOS is doing as well, is saying, well, what ends up happening with that object storage is it's a good first step, especially at our price point, the lowest cost in the states, to say, okay, maybe you are a managed service provider in the IT space. and you have a backup product on Veeam or Cronus or one of the other backup products that's out there, you want an object storage endpoint to have an additional replica, or maybe it's your primary replica for that backup storage. That's an easy first step. You're just putting in your user credentials for object storage within your backup tool, and you're off to the races. You're just writing data out there and everything's set to go. From there, it's a very simple product to understand. Okay, I bolt on additional customers, I make X amount per customer. That's the extent of it. The next steps being, okay, maybe you want to provide that remote spin functionality in case of a disaster. So keeping warm nodes or cold nodes where a customer wants a DR scenario and wants to be able to fail over to fail over to the cloud or something like that. That's an easy implementation within our environment. From there, we start adding on additional things where you're starting to have desktops as a service, or terminal services, or remote environments as a service. That's people are starting to adopt the cloud more and more for those types of things, keeping those data points up in the cloud and redundant as opposed to on-prem from that standpoint and a single point of failure. So typically that's our land and expand type of approach.
So it sounds like, creating redundancy, backup. How about like solutions, software platforms that are doing a lot of video or audio? Like, are those good use cases for you, and the type of use cases you focus on serving?
Yeah, video especially. We have a couple of customers that record live streams to our object storage and then subsequently use those streams for analytics and other purposes. So, writing upwards of 100 terabyte per day into our environment and then performing analytics on that. So, the speed and everything is there to be able to do that from an ISV or partner standpoint. We also have simpler partners that are saying, look, I just want an object storage endpoint that I'm going to attach to a website and use it for file store and video clips, or CDN storage, or CDN origination being the data point for your CDN updates and those types of things. So we really get into the weeds a lot with a lot of our customers with those use cases.
Very cool. So a couple more questions for you here today. I wanted just more general about the market. I know we've talked a lot about IONOS right now, and this one kind of guides us back towards where we see things going. And if, a lot of the large language models that we've seen come out, especially the foundation models, have supported text use cases. And I don't know, I've heard some pretty crazy stats. Like if you accumulated all the text in the world across the internet, you're not even in the petabytes of data storage. And I don't know if that's true or not. Maybe you can fact check me on it. But also, it seems kind of like we're in, let's call it the seventh or eighth inning of, the text-based models. Everything outside of maybe creating synthetic data and filling in blanks that we don't have today. But if you were to look and do that same analysis at what inning are we at in supporting multimodal models, and how do we need to what do we need to do to like catch up with where we're at with these text-based models on the multimodal side?
Well, at least $1 million question in that one. If we absolutely had a crystal ball and knew how to do all that, I wouldn't have to be a solutions architect. But I can talk about what we're seeing from customer standpoints that I work with all the time. And one of the things we are seeing, speaking specifically to the text-based models that are out there, we're seeing an interesting case where the frontier models are obviously the cutting edge, and that's all of the internet that we can find and rolled up into vector math and thrown out there so that we can basically query them with the entire knowledge of the internet that's out there. What I am often finding is a lot of my customers are doing a tiered approach when it comes to the models, where a lot of models, I don't want to throw particular names out there for any particular person, but the non-frontier models, there's a lot of smaller models that are out there that are ultimately going to be able to run on on-prem gear, so that these smaller types of models are going to have specific use cases themselves. So a company I'm working with right now is doing building telemetry for properties across a city. And that building telemetry might be everything from HVAC and chilling pumps to refrigeration and all of those types of things that are instrumented and have tooling around. And you don't need a frontier model like ChatGPT or Anthropic or whatever you want to use. You don't need to be throwing that data at a frontier model and paying the frontier model costs. But what you do want to do is throw that data at smaller specialized models that are only going to do looking at a pump or looking at the chillers or those types of things. And that's where the specialization and the smaller use cases are coming into play, so that everyone sort of talks about, the internet being not dead, but getting there where the LLMs are just going to start talking to each other. And that's what we're starting to see with those smaller models talking to and creating data for those frontier models upstream. So you might have a bunch of pumps, in this particular case, within a building. They are talking to a local LLM, and then that LLM is creating a LLM data set, not exactly synthetic because it's based on actual hardware, but creating a data set that it is then feeding into a frontier model to get more data around. So I think what we are going to see is multiple tiers across those LLMs, so that models are feeding models before a human even gets that data presented to them. And that's really the interesting case where we're seeing, especially with object storage, where that data is being replicated, you know, 2, 3, 4 times over, so that each layer can query it again. And it's a pretty interesting space from that standpoint. And I think we're going to see a lot more specialization there.
Absolutely. One more about the market in general. I know a lot of us have seen the transition from like on-prem, where everybody was on-prem, to, some people are adopting cloud, to a majority of us are adopting cloud outside of some regulated industries, obviously, to what we're thinking at datastorage.com tomorrow kind of yields a shift towards hybrid or multi-cloud solutions. I'm wondering if your predictions are similar. Like, do you see development for, SaaS and AI solutions shifting to more of a hybrid or multi-cloud approach?
Ab- Absolutely, especially with those local models that are going to be run on-prem, because quite frankly, we're talking about systems that, while they may be expensive to replace, to monitor them is not exactly, you're not going to make money monitoring them, basically. So the providers out there are saying, look, you can't make any money on these if you're doing all your analysis within the cloud. So that is the edge computing part, where those LLMs working at the edge or within the buildings are going to then write their data up to the cloud. So the hybrid approach is definitely going to be the way that corporations go, especially when it comes to that edge computing piece, so that your initial compute is probably going to be done at the edge, and then those data sets are going to be written after that point. So,
All right. Well, I guess the kind of the golden question then is, you guys at IONOS have a really great entry price. How do you treat egress, and how do your egress fees vary compared to hyperscalers? And ultimately, this question is like, how do you use potentially egress fees to, or lower egress fees to enable a hybrid or multi-cloud environment?
yeah, so there's two options with that. The biggest one being the price point. Our egress fees are the cheapest in the industry, no matter what. So You can take any provider and put it right up against us, and the first 2 terabyte egress is free every month. And then on top of that, it's still the cheapest price for egress fees.
So what is that egress price?
So realistically, that first 2 terabyte being free, when we get into the direct math, it's only about 1 cent per gig in egress costs. So really the lowest cost that's out there.
So you can compare that to somebody like AWS at about 9 cents a
Yep.
terabyte. So great. Well, Seth, we have really enjoyed having you on the show today. You've given us a wealth of knowledge on both IONOS as well as where you guys see the market going. Thank you so much for coming. And maybe you can kind of finish things off by telling us, what does the roadmap for IONOS look like over the coming months and years?
Yeah, so that is a great question, no matter who you're talking to, obviously, because things are moving so fast now that every product we release, there's major changes that come to it within a couple of months. But I would say that the flexibility around using your data and what you can feed it into are going to be the primary drivers for a lot of companies that are looking to move their data around and analyze it in different ways. So we want to be able to provide that lowest cost data tier or data storage in our object storage so that any customer can come in and take that data into an analytical tools within our platform or within one of the hyperscalers platforms or somewhere else, and not worry about it from a price point standpoint. So all of these additional inference analysis and the AI stuff that's coming in, we want to be able to snap those in as they come on board. So a lot of our focus is really in the data streaming, data analysis, and then AI analysis from there on.
Amazing. Well, Seth, thanks again for joining us today. And we're rooting for you guys.
Thank you. We appreciate it, and thanks for having me.